Welcome, everybody, to Why 5% Succeed. This is the show where we learn from great entrepreneurs and experts about simple tips, tools, techniques, and tactics that you can apply in your business right now to make a phenomenal difference. Well, there have never been more entrepreneurs than right now. As a matter of fact, the trajectory is supposed to increase dramatically in terms of how many people choose to have their own small business as opposed to become regular employees. That's just going to continue to increase. So how do you stand out from the crowd? In a totally saturated marketplace, how can you quickly and easily differentiate your business so you attract your ideal clients? How can you leverage the latest technology so that you establish yourself as a true thought leader in your industry? Well, today I'm so delighted to have a wonderful colleague with me, Linda Popky. She's a speaker, an author, a marketing expert, and she's also the founder and president of Leverage to Market Associates. She is going to help us take a hands-on look at how to stand out from the crowd. Linda, I'm so delighted to have you join us today. Welcome.
Oh, Elaine, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
So I got to ask you, what prompted you to write your book? You've got a new book out, and it's called Marketing Above the Noise. Why now for this particular book?
Well, to be honest with you, Elaine, you hit the nail right on the head in your introduction. You said there have never been as many entrepreneurs as there are today, and it's so hard to stand out. So whether you're in a small business, a large business, no matter what you're doing, the environment is so busy, it's noisy, it's chaotic. And then the other thing that's happening is we have more and more technologies to reach consumers, to reach our audiences. And so we as the audience are being hit by all kinds of things, whether it's mobile ads or it's online ads or even old-fashioned in-person advertising. We're being hit by this all the time. And so as a result, it's harder and harder to stand out. What happens is consumers just hear more and more and more and more noise. And if we as marketers start to talk louder and louder and louder, all we're doing is adding to the noise. So it's time to step back and think about how you stand out, which is not to talk louder, but to be more effective in how you communicate.
You know, I love your distinction here, because what I'm hearing you say, and I might be off here, so I really want your perspective on this, but what I'm hearing you say is the old-fashioned way is just bombard people with messages. Just push as much stuff out there as you possibly can and hope something sticks, right? And now it's time to take a different approach, a much more strategic approach, so that you're inviting people in who are really a good fit for you. Is that a good description?
Well, Elaine, that's a really good way to put it. But let me go back a little bit further. What we've been doing recently is bombard people with messages. What I want to do is go back to the way things used to be thousands of years ago. We think about when we started to first have markets. We had someone, for example, you may have had cows and you had extra milk, and I had chicken and I had extra eggs, and we came together in a market to try and trade back and forth. And we did all the same things that people do today. We had to have a good product. If your milk wasn't good, you weren't going to be able to sell it very much. You had to have it priced correctly. If I wanted too much for my eggs, no one was going to buy them or trade with me. We had to be in the right place. If the market was on Wednesday and we showed up on Thursday, we were out of luck. So all of these things are the same, but going back to the strategic pieces, how you apply them in today's world is different, but you've got to go back to knowing your strategy, knowing who your customers are, having a quality product, having the right brand, having the right message. How do you communicate that? How do you sell that? And how do you bring this whole thing together? So those are the basics that I think we need to go back to in order to be successful.
Well, Linda, you may be doing a little bit of foreshadowing here, because I know in your book you talk about some dynamic market leverage factors that every single one of us can take a look at and take advantage of in our business. Could you give us a quick highlight? What are those dynamic market leverage factors that we really need to be paying attention to?
You're absolutely right, Elaine, because those are the factors that I have found no matter what industry you're in, you need to know this. It doesn't matter whether you're in B2B or B2C, whether you're a small business, a large business. And the first is to start with strategy. And that sounds pretty simple, but I can't tell you how many people say we're going to go off and execute on something, and we'll figure out the strategy later. which is sort of like getting in a car and saying, I'm going to drive somewhere, but I don't know where I'm going. Or even if I should be in a car to start with, maybe I should be walking or taking the train or riding my bike. So having a strategy and starting with that from a marketing perspective is extremely important. You also need to know your customers. You need to know them inside and out, what motivates them, what they care about, what makes a good customer versus a great customer, because not all customers are created equal. So how do you take care of them, but how do they take care of you as well? You need to have a good product. That goes without saying, whether it's a product or a service. Your offering needs to be good. It needs to meet what your customers need or what they will need in the future. So you need to be thinking forwardly. But you've got to do that. Once you've got that, you've got to have good, solid branding. You need to position yourself effectively, and then you need to be able to communicate. And the communication is where I think a lot of marketing teams start. They go out and they want to just send the messages out there, but you need to go back and you need to understand what it is you're doing and why, and tie that back to the strategy and the products and the customers. And of course, you need to understand the market that you're in very effectively. So what market are you in? Is it growing? Is it shrinking? Is it changing? What are the dynamics of that? That's all very, very important. How you reach your customer is important, and then having the metrics to bring it all together to say, are we doing the right things? Are we measuring the right things? So whether you're an entrepreneur or a big business, that's important, but particularly for entrepreneurs where you have very limited funds and a limited window of time in which you can really achieve success. That's very important, that you do all these things, and you do them well, and you do fewer things, but you do them well.
You know, I would love to have you give us a concrete example. I know you did lots of interviews, and you've got dozens of case studies in your book on different companies that have achieved high success using these dynamic market factors. So I'd love to have you take one of these that I know a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with. Let's take strategy. Can you give us an example of a company that's just really got a strong strategic direction that helps differentiate them in the marketplace, and then everything falls out of that?
Absolutely. So let's talk a little about Zillow, the online real estate marketplace. So when Zillow started a number of years ago, there was no online real estate marketplace. You didn't do these things online. There was nothing to compare themselves to. It was all kind of brand new virgin territory. So what they said is, we need to get good, solid information out to people about the real estate market. So we are, even though we make our money on advertising and working with real estate brokers, etc., we need to establish credibility. So they started to see themselves as a publisher as much as a seller of real estate services, and they started to create really, really good data about the real estate market. And what they did is they started to offer this at no charge to anybody who needed it, whether it was the federal government, the state governments, local real estate marketplaces, etc. So they started to, first of all, they had a very high quality product. They said, we need to know that our data is going to be good because we're putting this out there. But they put it out there, they got it out there, and they said, just make sure that you attribute it to us. And so they started to build this brand around Zillow. So now today, you'll look at the industry reports, and you'll always see, Zillow economists that talk about this. The White House has engaged with Zillow on certain activities. The Department of Housing, so of various states. They've become the name brand in that area, and they created this marketplace. And they did that by having a strategy of how they could get out there and really differentiate themselves from what was kind of this amorphous mess that no one knew what was going on. So they had to create the marketplace first, and then they had to be seen as the leader in it, and they are the leader today.
That's great. Thank you. That's a really good example. Now, it kind of leads into the very next question that I had, which is, as a small business owner, as an entrepreneur, how can you truly establish yourself as a thought leader in your industry, especially when it's a very crowded marketplace and there are a whole lot of people who do what you do?
So I'm going to challenge that assumption for a little bit, because I don't know that as an entrepreneur you should be in a marketplace where there are thousands of people doing what you do. What you need to do is you need to establish yourself in an area, in a niche, where you can own that. So if you're in an area where you're just another Me Too company, I'm not sure that that's a great place to invest a lot of time and energy. So the first thing you need to do with thought leadership is you need to find a way to differentiate yourself. and you need to find an area that you can own. So stake out a position and own it. Stake out some high ground and say, that's where I'm going. Now, as time goes on, you may have to do a little bit of pivoting and moving, and that's okay. But you start to build a brand and you start to build awareness around that. And then you define the role that you want to have. So, for example, you could decide that you want to be not necessarily appealing to everyone, but appealing to just a certain part of the market. You want to perhaps go after something that's different than the big players, if there are big players there. But you want to do that, and you want to start then creating a message about why you're different and getting that out there with creating content. The three ways that we really communicate today are with content, with conversations, and by building community. So you want to get the right content out there to your audiences. You want to start creating conversations and engaging in conversations with your audiences, and you want to be involved in communities. Now, for a time there, we thought we each had to build our own separate communities, and in some cases you can, but the bottom line is with all the noise in the marketplace today, there's enough communities out there. We don't need another Facebook, we don't need another Twitter, we don't need another whatever, so LinkedIn. So what you do is you go and you find the people who are engaged in conversations about your area of interest, where you have expertise, and you engage in those conversations in those communities. So have a presence there. For example, you can start out by creating your own environment, or you can go to a place where you can go to LinkedIn, where there are a number of communities that are going to be of interest probably to you and to your potential customers. Go there and start engaging and start acting like a thought leader, putting things out there that show your expertise. Now that presumes that you really do have expertise, but I'm going to give you the credit, benefit of the doubt that those folks listening who are entrepreneurs really do have value to provide. So the question is not how do you get out there and sell, but how do you get out there and show your value?
That is brilliant, and I'm going to recap that because you covered a lot of ground, and I think this is a fundamental basic that people really need to understand. The first one is don't try to be all things to all people. Pick a niche. Pick a small, concrete segment of active buyers where you can add value. Then the second thing is define the role that you want to play in that niche, in that marketplace. So, for example, a couple of different roles that come to mind. You might be a strategic advisor, or you might provide implementation tools or services. Those are two different roles. Maybe you do both. But you decide what is that strategic position and value that you're going to contribute to the marketplace. And then the third thing is to actually get out there and interact in communities where those buyers exist. So if you're a marketing expert, sure, it's great to hang out with other marketers. You get some great ideas. But even more importantly, if your true area of expertise is supporting coaches, you need to be hanging out where the coaches hang out. And you need to be providing great marketing ideas to where those coaches are. Because then you're differentiating yourself and showcasing your value. You're providing value before they hire you. Every single interaction that you have with anybody these days needs to create more value for them. So by the time they're done with the conversation, they go, wow, that Linda, I need more of Linda. She's awesome. So yeah, I really appreciate that because so often we jump right in and the tail's wagging the dog. There's no strategic vision on how am I going to differentiate myself in the marketplace. And if you haven't identified a niche, you're really at a disadvantage.
You're absolutely Linda, correct. Yep.
Yeah, I want to continue this conversation but go in a slightly different direction because you said it earlier. There's a gazillion places to be. You know, there's all the social media sites, there's email, there's mailers, there's television ads. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that you can try to reach out and find your ideal clients. So what are you suggesting people take a look at? How can we model some of the other companies that you've been evaluating for your book? What are some great strategies that we might consider?
So how do you get out there and find the right customers? I think part of it is really going out and understanding your market And that includes a couple things. It means understanding your customers and your prospects, but it also means understanding your competitors. So there are going to be, in most marketplaces, there are going to be competitors who are out there and doing something, and you may not like what they're doing, but they're doing something right because they're still in business and they have customers. So understand what they do right as well as what they do wrong, and understand kind of where you can fit in there and look at doing something a little bit differently. So how can you kind of slide in a little bit where people aren't looking? So for example, one of the companies that I profile is Caribou Coffee. Now Caribou is located, they're headquartered in the Midwest, but they have a number of locations all over the country, and they're not Starbucks. And they know that, and they know that they are never going to have the saturation of Starbucks, so they try to be different. They go out and they try to be just kind of a little bit different. They create a personality for themselves. Even from the point of getting their employees engaged in their branding, they went out to their employees a year or two ago and said, we need an April Fool's idea, so what can we do here? And they had a contest. And some of the ideas came back were just bizarre, and some of them were kind of interesting, but they came up with some really, really interesting things. And some of the ideas that they came up with were good enough not just to be kind of an April Fool's promotion, but actually be considered as real product ideas. And their customers, people who love Caribou and go there because it's not Starbucks, because they like that personality, that kind of quirkiness. And so, even in an area where you say, gee, Starbucks, there's a Starbucks on every corner, sometimes we think there's two on every corner, there's room for another competitor to come in with a different outlook and position and brand themselves differently.
That is so true. One of the things that I think a lot of people forget is that a lot of what your clients are buying from you is you. They're buying your ideas, how you gather all this information and consolidate it and simplify it and put it into an easy-to-implement process for them. They're buying your strategic thinking. That's truly what they're buying from you in terms of your product or your service. So it's okay if there are other people in the marketplace. In fact, it proves that there are buyers who are eager to buy from you. I mean, look at it this way. It doesn't matter what your interests are. If you're really into tennis or golfing or earrings, you're not going to just buy one, right? You're not just going to buy one book. You're not going to go to one golf, I don't even know what they're called, golf course. I'm not a golfer. But you're going to want multiple experiences. If you're an enthusiast, if you are passionate about marketing or public relations, you're going to do the research. You're going to want to learn from a lot of different experts so that you can apply that expertise in your field. That's what your clients are all about. So it's okay if there are other people in that marketplace. You just have to have your unique personality come to play, because that's incredibly attractive to your ideal client. Well, Linda, I want to get back to your book because I can't wait to get my hands on that, baby. It's going to be so good. I know. I want one of those advanced copies. You're taunting me holding that up. You know you are.
There we go. This is a proof. They will be out very shortly.
Okay, there we go. Oh, that's a gorgeous thing. I want one. I want it now. But I want to ask you, what's something that you've discovered that's a little startling, that kind of surprised you as you pulled this information together about standing out from the crowd?
So there's a couple of things, and I think one that's really interesting in terms of being surprised is that it doesn't necessarily mean that how you stand out is always tied directly to your business. So for example, if you think someone like Zappos sells shoes. But they stand out not because they sell shoes, but because of their customer service, the fact that you can return them, and then they've got this whole idea of, if you've paid any attention to sort of kind of their sales process, when they hire people, after a certain period of time, they actually pay them to leave, which sounds bizarre, but they want to have the best customer service people, and they say, if this is not the right environment, we just as soon you leave, you take some money and go somewhere else. So Zappos has become a thought leader, not because they sell the best shoes or the most expensive shoes or the most unusual shoes, but because of their customer service. And so that's kind of an interesting thing. And as an entrepreneur, taking this back to our entrepreneurs, you want to become an object of interest. You want people to really feel gee, I want to find out more about her. I want to find out what her business is, etc. Because as you mentioned, there's just you cannot separate an entrepreneur from their business. You really are selling yourselves. So you have to do what it takes to be different. Let me give you another example of someone I profile in my book. I play piano. I played piano for years, and a number of years ago I discovered this wonderful piano camp for adults in Vermont. And the woman who runs it, Polly Vanderlyn, has run it for a number of years. Her mother, her parents started this before. Her mother ran the camp. And so she brings in about 25 adults about 8 or 10 times a year for a week of playing piano and gourmet food and a whole experience, but it's all around the music. Well, people said to her, and it really is, the piano camp would not be the same without Polly. It's called Sonata Camp, and it would not be the same without Polly. But there is only one Polly. And so what she's done is tried to figure out how people want me to go visit, they want me to travel, but I've got a family, I can't do that. So she came up with a new idea, which involves how do you involve technology in thought leadership. And she had a student who was moving to Austria, and he said, I want to take piano lessons from you. And she said, well, Austria, Vienna is a long way to commute. He said, why don't we try this over Skype? And so they did it. They got some of the kinks out, and she now offers a way to have online piano lessons. And she's got a whole a series of maybe about 4 or 5 things you need to do, but it's very simple. Basically, you've got the piano. If you've got an iPad and a decent internet connection, we can do that. And yeah, you're not going to get the finer touches of finalizing a piece, but overall, she's got this camera set up in her studio, in her kind of performance area that she's already, what she was doing, she was already videotaping classes and streaming those on the net. So she had the piano set up, but with the cameras, so that you can actually see her hands on the keyboard, and so she can show you something. And then through the iPad and using Skype, we have people in Austria, people in California, people all over the world that are having piano lessons. Now that is really capitalizing on a couple of things. One is technology, and the second is that the unusual part, the thing that people come for, is their interaction with Polly. And so she's able to take that and to really leverage that beyond so many hours in the day that she can physically be in any one place. Now she can be anywhere.
That is so cool. That is really
Isn't that cool? That is great.
I love that. Yeah. But I'm going to summarize just a little bit,
sure,
because I am at a disadvantage because I have not been able to pry loose one of the copies of your book yet. But it strikes me there are some obvious areas where you can try to differentiate your business from your competition. One of them is the kind of product or service you provide. Remember, we were talking about you could be a strategic advisor, or you could be someone who's doing implementation services. So that's one example. It could also be your customer service. The same way Zappos is trying to go above and beyond with their customer service. How could you do that? Like you were just providing the example of virtual piano lessons. That's kind of above and beyond, right? The third is distribution. Maybe I should have saved the virtual piano lessons for that. But you know, again, with distribution, one of the things that I love about Zappos is you can order up a whole bunch of shoes, they overnight them, and they pay for the shipping for you to return the shoes that you don't want. I mean, what a concept. That's brilliant, because they're actually taking the shoe store to you, to your house, so that you're ensured you're going to get the shoes you love. So distribution is number 3. And number 4 is maybe it's unique research and development in how you create your products, like the crowdsourcing that you were describing with Caribou Coffee. That's great, because your customers love to be involved. They love to be a part of the solution. And when it's their idea, they're much more likely to buy it, right? So those are some really fabulous ways that you can differentiate your business in the marketplace, your unique product or service, your customer service, your distribution model, or research and development. Did I leave anything out, Linda? I probably did.
Oh, well, we could talk about this for hours.
I know,
right?
It's way too much fun.
But one thing I do want to mention is you need to understand a factor I call market disruption. And that says, you know, things may be going along in a perfectly fine level way for a long time, and then all of a sudden they change. And the perfect example of this is our friends from Uber. You know, for years and years and years, we put up with taxis. They were dirty, they were smelly, they were expensive, they never came on time, and we just lived with them. And Uber said, you don't have to do that anymore. And so what they have done is they have revolutionized this transportation industry. So now, I mean, there are cities and states that are fighting it, but they're not winning because people are saying, I want the ability to do that. And now it's started to happen. Airbnb did that in the hotel space. Now what's starting to happen is we're seeing the Uber of this and the Uber of that. But beyond just looking what Uber did, the whole idea is how can you look at a market that looks perfectly happy today and say, A, either can I disrupt it, or B, it's being disrupted, and since things are going to change, how do I take advantage of that? How do I come in and be different?
That is so true. It's so true. And there are simple ideas that you can port over to your industry. I love the fact that Federal Express was actually the idea of taking how banks treat money and applying that to real packages. And that was the distinction. It was really interesting because the founder of Federal Express, he had all kinds of bad reviews on his dissertation for his PhD when he came up with this idea. So what did he do? He turned it into a multi-billion-dollar worldwide industry. Yeah, you know, there's nothing like success is the best revenge, I guess, is the way to look at that. Linda, you are giving us so much to think about. I just want to glean a couple more little tidbits out of you while we have you here. So what can our audience do right now, today, as soon as the show's over, to start differentiating themselves in the marketplace?
So what can you do today? You can go out and you can start looking at all of the information that's available to you. One of the things that we hear so much about is big data, but you don't have to be a big company and be looking at huge amounts of data. There is so much information out there today that you can either collect or that you can look at, you can have someone else can collect it on customers or prospects or the market. Start looking at that and start understanding where you can fit in and how you can really become kind of an object of interest. That's what my mentor Alan Weiss says. He says, become an object of interest. So how do you do that? And how do you show up and how do you start to look at differentiating yourself? And the key thing to remember is it's not about being louder and louder and adding to the noise. If we think about the difference between noise and music, noise is just all this kind of cacophony of things sounds that come together that are disturbing. And music is something that is pleasing to our ears. So how do we become part of a music to our customers and to our prospects? And think about that. There's no way you can do that without knowing what your customers like, because what you think is good music might be noise to someone else. So, and we've certainly seen that generation after generation. You know, what we loved as rock music, our parents thought was horrible. What we like, our kids think is just old-fashioned. So you need to understand that, which is why you cannot market to millennials the same way you market to baby boomers. You need to be able to think about what's different to them. To me, it's the reason why you need to look and perhaps look at demographics or psychographics or gender. Sometimes there are lots of different ways that people divide themselves up. It's not always by age, but you need to look at your customers and you need to understand what it is they're doing, why they're doing it, and what they're looking for. And you need to meet them where they are as opposed to asking them to come to you. So whatever they're looking for and they're not getting, how can you provide that? And that's a great place to start.
I loved what you just said, Linda, and I want to rephrase it just a little bit because there's a huge difference between information and insight.
Absolutely.
We are bombarded with information. Your prospects really don't want a ton more information. They want insight. They want to understand, why is this important? How is this going to make a difference to my business or to my life or to how I feel about myself? And what do I do next to make it real, to make it happen? So when you can answer those questions, and sure, you're providing information in order to do that, but you put the layer of insight on top of the information, you will immediately differentiate yourself from the majority of people out there who are just sharing stuff instead of insight.
Absolutely, and that's a very key differentiator because we have plenty of information and we don't even need analysis. We have all kinds of tools to do analysis, but having the insight and then having the people in place that have both the ability and the authority and the just can see the big picture to make the right judgment calls and make decisions, that's what's critical.
Well, I would love to hear, just because I know a lot of people are going to want to rush out there and make some things happen, right? We tend to be action takers, and that's great. You know, challenged action is way better than no action. You know, mistaken action is better than no action. But are there any hidden challenges, hidden issues that we kind of need to be aware of before we just jump out there and start talking with everybody?
Well, a couple of things, particularly if you're focused on marketing. Over the last decades or so, marketers have really kind of developed to be their own kind of breed. And we're creatives, and yeah, we have an analytic piece to us, but we kind of go off and we deliver all this neat stuff. The world we live in today is not a world that that allows us to be lone wolves anymore. We need to be tied in with the senior management of our organizations, with the product development people, so that product folks aren't designing things and throwing it over the wall, and we don't have the insight and we don't give it to the product people in enough time. We also need to be tied to sales, so that we're working effectively and partnering and not at each other's throats. And then, as you mentioned about data and analysis and insights, we need to be very closely tied to the people in IT, the CIOs, the people who are helping us get the data so we get the right stuff and we use it correctly. So we need to be looking as more of team players. And that's true. Certainly entrepreneurs need to be thinking in kind of that bigger way to look. But as you grow your organization, you need to make sure that marketing is part of the strategic business discussion. Because otherwise, we get thrown in afterwards, then you kind of get something that just adds more noise and it doesn't cut through all the chaos.
That is so true. That's so true. Well, Linda, I would love to find out, is there a cool new tool or app or resource of some sort that you've recently come across that you think has really got a lot of potential?
Well, I have to tell you, Elaine, the one that I just discovered thanks to you is Google Plus Hangouts. I had not heard about Hangouts, but I hadn't actually gone and done one until you and I started talking about this interview, and it's been a lot of fun and easy to use. And you know, I'm looking forward to doing more of these. Great for doing remote interviews, and love the way that this technology comes together. So I think there's a lot of potential here.
Yeah, I really love Hangouts. I think that they are the wave of the future, especially for busy entrepreneurs, because you want to capture your expertise quickly and easily. Capture it once and repurpose it lots of different times. And what I love about Google Hangouts, you can do group coaching sessions, you can do a show, you can do a lot of different things with Google Hangouts and then have it automatically record to YouTube. You have that video, you can peel off the audio and that's your podcast. You transcribe it, that's your blog posts. There are so many different ways for you to leverage your expertise and your content just by capturing it once in a Google Hangout. So I'm a big believer. So do you have any final words for us, Linda?
One just thing, I think it's time to change the conversation so that we make sure that we're thinking a little bit differently. And I think it's up to us to kind of take what's in front of us and run with it. Part of, I think, the most important thing now is to show up and be prepared. Don't wait for someone to invite you in, but show up, be ready, be looking for opportunity, and go out and get it. There's no noise unless you make it. So go out there and make some sound, but try to make some sound that's pleasant and try to make some music instead of adding to the noise.
That is great. Linda, Popky, thank you so much for being here with us today on Why 5% Succeed. I can't wait to get my hands on your book, Marketing Above the Noise. And for everyone else, I look forward to seeing you next week, Wednesday. Let me see, that is February 18th. I'm going to be at the Traffic and Conversion Summit, and I will be broadcasting live from the Traffic and Conversion Summit. So I will see you next week at 1 p.m. Pacific. Take care.
Thanks, Elaine.